airliner carrying 128 people, 82 of them Canadians, has crash landed in South America. The Fly Jamaica plane had just left Guyana. It was headed to Toronto when the pilot reported an emergency. Now, the flight was able to circle back to that airport in Georgetown, but it overshot the runway when it landed. I can tell you 6 people were hurt. We have got Natasha Fata watching this story closely, looking for all developments. Natasha, what's the latest?
So, Suhanna, as you've mentioned, 6 people were injured in that flight as it crash landed into Guyana's main international airport in Georgetown. So we know that 120 passengers were on board, including 2 infants, 8 crew members, and 82 Canadians. Now, this Fly Jamaica flight was meant to leave Guyana early this morning, make its way to Toronto when something went terribly wrong. We know that the flight was initially delayed for takeoff. Then it took off at around 2 in the morning. And according to one of the passengers, it was spinning in circles. It wasn't taking off in the way it was meant to. And then shortly after takeoff, the pilot went on board the intercom and said that there were hydraulics issues and that they would have to make an emergency landing back in Guyana. So he radioed back. They started making their way there. And then seemingly, according to one passenger, they landed safely, but then the wheels weren't working and they couldn't bring the plane to a stop, and they were spinning right off the runway. And that's when things got very scary for those on board. Let's have a listen to that passenger.
We overshot the runway, and at the end, there's a whole bunch of spikes, and we got about 2 flat tires, or 3 tires were blown out, and the plane shifted to the right. One of the wings came apart, and the engine on the right side actually flipped over, and we crashed into a big sand pile at an edge of a cliff. There's a big drop about 30, 40 feet on the other side. If we had 10 more feet, we would be down in the cliff, down in the ditch. So it's a miracle over miracles.
And after that plane landed, he said that's when people started screaming and praying and cursing, and they were told they needed to evacuate the flight. And he says it's there that most of the injuries took place. It wasn't because of that erratic landing and spinning off the runway. It was because there was so much chaos getting out of the plane that people were injured going down those slides. We know of at least 2 elderly passengers who were taken to a nearby hospital as a precaution. 6 injuries, none of them particularly seriously, and the crew members say that everyone was evacuated safely. The local police are looking into this. Part of the airport has been cut off as the investigation moves forward, and the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board is now also involved looking into this, into finding out exactly what went wrong. In the meantime, all those passengers that were hoping to be back in Toronto, they have to make alternative arrangements, and the airport as well as the plane provider is saying that they'll try and support them.
And some of them might be afraid to get on a plane right away. I mean, their hearts must have been pounding. Thank you, Natasha.
You're welcome.
And you just heard a bit there from Invor Badesi, one of those Canadians on board that flight. He spoke with CBC's Heather Hiscox from his hotel in Georgetown. Here is their full conversation.
I am very shaken and very, nervous, and just a lot of emotions going through me. It's like all my goosebumps are going crazy. It's just a shock and awe, more or less.
I'm very glad that you're well and able to talk to me. And what we're going to do is let's just go step by step through this story so we can get your account. You're the first person we've heard on this. So it's early in the morning. You were sitting in the front of the plane to about 2:10 when the plane took off. But was there anything unusual either at the time of takeoff or prior to takeoff that made you give pause?
Yes, there was. We were scheduled to leave at 1:30. Everyone was boarded and ready to go, but they had some issues on one of the left side front doors. It would not close properly. It would not clear the signal. So after they called the maintenance crew, it took them about 45 minutes. That's what the delay was, to fix the problem. And after that problem was fixed, we were cleared to take off. And once we got cleared to take off, we flew about 10-15 minutes in the air, just over the Atlantic Ocean, and we were circling around for a few times, I noticed, and the captain announced there's some hydraulic issue or hydraulic problem. He has to return to the airport.
Okay, let me jump in there for just a second. So that's what we understand was the problem. He radioed in, he'd had a problem with the hydraulic system, and he did announce that over the loudspeaker to the passengers, did he?
Yes, he did. That's correct.
And then what did people do when they heard there was going to be a problem and you had to turn around?
Well, most of them were sleeping at the time because it was late in the morning, right? So, but they didn't really pay attention, but I paid attention. I was wide awake, and I just kept my eyes more awake to see what we were doing. And then eventually we got back to the runway, and we did a nice landing. It wasn't bumpy or nothing out of the ordinary, but he turned the reverse thrusters on, and then when we landed on the ground, the wheels were still spinning. They were not braking. There was no hydraulic brakes to brake the wheels for stopping. And then we overshot the runway, and at the end, there's a whole bunch of spikes, and we got about 2 flat tires, or 3 tires were blown out, and the plane shifted to the right. One of the wings came apart, and the engine on the right side actually flipped over, and we crashed into a big sand pile at an edge of a cliff. There's a big drop about 30, 40 feet on the other side. If we had 10 more feet, we would be down in the cliff, down in the ditch. So it's a miracle over miracles.
Well, it really is. Okay, let's just look at it. There we can see, we're looking at pictures, so you can't tell exactly, but we're looking at pictures of the plane now with that front wheel in the sand, and then the cliff is just obviously just in front of the nose there. So you're awake, you come down, and a fine landing, as you say, but you're aware that the plane is not coming to a stop, and you're blowing through things. And what's going through your mind?
That's where the panic starts coming in. Everybody got woken up at that time, and they start cursing, they start praying. It was just that when chaos started going crazy. Everybody just going crazy, screaming, just crying for their lives, everything. That's the crazy time.
And was anybody helping you calm down? The flight attendants or the pilots or anything? Were they assisting you at all?
No, I was okay. I was comfortable. I understand what was happening because I was very close to the front of the plane. So when they said everybody to relax, we were all relaxed. And then the captain announced evacuate, and then the door opened, and I was the first one off the plane. I was in the front business class, row 1, and I just jumped off and ran for my life.
So you slid down the chute and ran away?
Yeah, I ran as far as I can before that plane turned to the big fireball.
Well, thankfully it didn't, because we can see that plane on the screen. But the emergency crews, were they there waiting for you to help you?
No, they came about 2 minutes late, I would presume, about 2 minutes, 3 minutes to get to the site, because they're parked very far from the terminal,
So where did you run?
We ran along the sand, along the cliff, along the edge of the cliff. Ran away from the plane.
And was everyone running with you? I mean, was it a scene of chaos? Has everyone just tried to get off that as quickly as possible?
Well, my group was about 13 passengers and about 2 crew members. And the rest of the crew went on the other side of the plane. I went on the north side of the plane. I went on the south side, on the ditch side. So we are like a small group of us stayed together.
Okay.
And we were like outside the airport. We were fenced over. We had to cut the fence. The fire guys had to cut the fence to get us back into the airport.
Amazing. Now, 6 people had injuries and had to be taken to hospital for treatment. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine. They were injured because of coming down the slide and not getting off the slide fast enough. So people behind them were kicking them and trying to get them off, kind of thing. There was a lot of chaos at the bottom of the slide.
One of the people mentioned that there was smoke in the cabin. Did you see that at all at any point?
I left first. I took off and ran, but there was smoke where the engine rolled over, but that took about 20 minutes after everybody was off the plane. Then they had the fire guys on site, and they foamed it, and they got rid of the smoke outside the plane.
So they cut the fence to bring you in. They're looking after you. How are they treating you now? What are you hearing about what's going to happen to you and coming back?
Yeah, Fly Jamaica is not responding to anybody. They're just waiting. And I might just have to buy a separate ticket to get back to Canada because I have a business to run, and I got things to do. I can't stay here for another 2 or 3 days.
Listen, I hear the adrenaline in your voice, I fear. And I don't fear, I think I'm understanding that. You called it a miracle of miracles. Here you are just hours after this. Just sum up the whole experience as you've just lived it.
Yes. Well, my father passed away last year. I think he's watching me, and he gave me a good he told me, I'm not ready for you yet. Stay down here.
That was Invor Badesi, one of the Canadians on that plane that had to make a crash landing. And we're just getting an alert from Global Affairs Canada saying that while there were, yes, 6 people who were injured, none of those was a Canadian. So that's the latest from Global Affairs Canada.